Hey, 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 we made it.
How you doing,
Welcome,
Terry?
everybody. Welcome, everybody. Here we are, another week. Another week. We are at episode 164. So, welcome to episode 164. We're going to talk about blessings and cursings tonight. We have Gary and David and our illustrious leader, Dr. Ricks, with us tonight. So, if you'd like to start us out.
Okay, this is a cute little story. Why did Jack get fired from Pepsi Cola? He got fired from Pepsi Cola because he tested positive for Coke.
Wow.
He'd probably get fired from 7-Up, too.
Yeah. And Gary has a nice little story for us.
Well, this is just a short story, but did you know that light travels faster than sound? That's why some people appear to be pretty bright until they begin to speak. Nobody in particular, I think.
Yeah.
Hey.
We all know that feeling, don't we? They look so sharp until they open their mouth. Okay, here's a real groaner. How did the scissors know the fastest route? How did scissors know the fastest route? They had a shortcut.
That's a groaner.
As a groaner. I'm going to tell you this one. This is this joke actually has another title, but I changed the name to protect myself. A lady was visiting Mrs. Doofus, who had acquired 2 new dogs. So she asked, "What's the name of your new dogs?" "Rolex and Timex." She says, "Well, those are cute. They're interesting names for dogs. Aren't they interesting names for dogs?" She said, "Whoever heard of naming your dog Rolex and Timex?" She says, "Duh, they're watchdogs."
Makes sense to me.
Okay, we're going to end it there. I got a couple other jokes. I think I'll spare us the pain.
People are listening going, make it stop, make it stop.
Spare us the pain. Next time, we got some great ones here coming up next time, like Harp and Shacks. Anyway, today we're going to talk about blessings, cursing. And you know, there are 2 chapters in the Bible called the blessing and cursing chapter. We're going to primarily use the longest one. They say the same thing. You know, the one thing about Israel and God that I want to kind of emphasize as we start off is that the blessings were really quite something for a physical nation. You know, God told those Israelites they'd be special, they'd be blessed, they'd be looked up to, they would be financially well off, and it was really impressive things, and the world would look to them. And there were quite a few times, especially for Judah, and maybe some other times when the world wasn't quite aware of why they're being blessed. Those blessings did occur. But there was also warnings, because Moses, as he was getting ready to, walk up the mountain and God was going to put him to sleep, as part of his farewell address, he puts the children of Israel on 2 mountains. One says the blessings, one the curses, so like acting out a play. And when you read Deuteronomy 28, the cursing part toward the end is longer than the blessing. Not that the blessings weren't fabulous, but I think Moses was trying to emotionally make a point, because the big tricky thing about it is there's a big if you obey, if you do this, if you do that, then you'll be blessed. And I do think those chapters are relevant both in understanding the Bible and the history of Israel, which is a big part of the Bible, of course, but also they're relevant for the days that we are in now too.
Yeah, I think they are. I think we're starting to see in this country a lot of indications that, at least minimum, that we've lost protection in the past, I'd say, 15 years. It's easy to see, and it seems to be like it's gaining ground, the fact that we're losing protection, at least.
I deal with young people.
Go ahead.
I deal with young people who, they'll say, oh, I'm Christian, but they don't go to church, they don't know what it means. And I'll ask them what's going on. And then they don't have a clue. But I'll ask them, when you become a parent, you're going to love your children? Oh, yeah. I mean, like with all your heart? Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to be the best dad or mom ever. And I go, now, are you going to give them chores, things they have to do to make them better people? Like you have to mow the lawn, or you got to pick up your clothes, or you got to do dishes. Well, yeah. Well, then when you do that, would you give them allowance? Does that seem fair? Well, yeah, that's fair to give them an allowance, especially when you're a kid would like allowance or getting an allowance. And I go, well, what happens when they don't do what they're supposed to do? You're going to continue to give them allowance and pretend like it didn't happen, or are you going to correct them, take the allowance, and maybe even punish them for not doing the things? Well, yeah, that's what a parent does. I go, as a Christian, you should tell me, that means you believe that God is the father of human beings, right? He's the almighty father. Then why would he bless us when we're doing everything that we're not supposed to do? And they don't give me answers, but I let them think about it. So I try to plant the seed in the most rudimentary way,
You could almost look at it, if you reject God, God's going to reject you. And I think, of course, in some cases, God actively did whatever he actively did. But I think in a lot of cases, when you don't follow God's ways, you follow the more pagan ways of the world, human nature, you automatically damage yourself and your nation.
I think I said this before, but God created us to worship him. And if we don't worship him, we will worship something else. And nothing else deserves to be worshiped. I don't care if it's, exercise, or if it's drugs, or a rock star, or a movie star, or a sport, or a game. When you start worshiping something else, everything in your life goes into off balance. A little half bubble off the center. It just doesn't work. But if you worship God first, the other things tend to fall in place.
Ken mentioned that he thought the last 15 years was a lot of this stuff was becoming obvious. Kind of a coincidence. This is the 15th. This year is the 15th anniversary of 9/11, and that was the first time that we were attacked on our own soil.
Well, we're going to continue to be attacked on our own soil until we turn our ways back to God. That is addressed many, many, many places, but the book of Deuteronomy has a real good scripture, a couple scriptures there that discuss that are very, I guess for Christians, very eye-opening.
Go ahead, Ken.
Just real quick, you could go from when the country, before the country was started, when they first came over here, and how biblical they were. In fact, the reason they came here was how biblical they wanted to be, and and keep the Sabbath and not keep Christmas, and escape the religious oppression from Europe, from England. And every time, every so many decades pulled further and further away, the less, and obviously it accelerated a tremendous amount since World War II. It's just accelerated how much we reject God, instead of just ignoring God or this country as a whole anyway, instead of just ignoring or going about our lives and not focusing on God, to outright in the last 15, 20 years or so rejecting God. I mean, out and out, large numbers of this country absolutely rejects God. I mean, they booed him at the convention. What was that? 4 years or 8 years ago?
I think it was 2000. Was it 2008 or 2012? I think it was 2012. But
I think it was 12, and I don't even know. They may not have included it in the platform. It may not even been enough to make the news this time. I don't know, but they outright booed God, and they do that from time to time. You'll see in different events and things where it's just an outright rejection, and that's what hits the paper, and that's what seems to be a more representative of, even though it's not a representative of the people as a whole, but it's what gets out there and is seen by the world, that we are rejecting God. And it seems like, yes, we've always had earthquakes, we've always had fires, we've always had droughts, we've always had floods. It seems to me like they're getting closer together and more intense. And it's not global warming. It's a rejection of God's of God. Period. It's just a rejection of God, and it seems like he's pulling back his blessings.
One way you look at American history is that they started off as 13 fairly small colonies on the east side of the Appalachian Mountains. They were outnumbered, outgunned, a whole bunch of other things, but everything they did more or less worked as far as expanding all the way across to deep in the Pacific Ocean, and in many cases of both Texas and America, and they fought wars where they were outnumbered, but somehow victory always came, up until, I guess, Vietnam, and even that was a victory. We just threw it away, but that's maybe another story for another discussion. But you know what I'm saying? America just seemed to be, like Napoleon said, when he sold Louisiana Purchase, he says, and I think that other famous French philosopher said the same thing: God protects babies and the United States of America. Well, yeah, was it? Okay, I'll leave that one out. But who was the philosopher that said that again? Never mind. We think it was Churchill, but somebody else said it before he did. But that's America's history. We just always seem to be blessed. I mean, I'm speaking nationally, not individually. Let's go to our first scripture and see if we can see the signs of where things are changing.
You know, I bet we'll have someone chime in and let me know who did say that quote.
I think it was de Tocqueville said it before Churchill did.
Maybe.
As well as Napoleon. I'm pretty sure that's who it was.
Isn't he the one that, in de Tocqueville is also the one that said America is great because it's good? I believe that's the same. All right.
Alex de Tocqueville said that.
All right, here we go. Deuteronomy 28:3. We're looking at the blessings, and all these slides are blessings at the top, and I put curses underneath there. So, Deuteronomy 28:3. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. And verse 5 is, blessed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl.
Before we go, I want to just mention, you could interpret that two ways. A lot of times they had little wall cities, so they had a city and then they went out in the country to raise their food. They're blessed in both places, city and country. I've read some articles. Some people from Europe came to America in the early part of the 19th century. They were so impressed with things in New York City and some other big American cities compared to European cities. And most people don't know that, but New York and Chicago in many ways were further advanced than most major cities in Europe, far and away. And I never knew that until I read their material. But you would not say that about American cities today, would you? Let's see Chicago.
Chicago, Detroit. You could go on and on.
Yeah.
All right, curses. Deuteronomy 28:16. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the country. Cursed shall your basket and your kneading bowl.
And I would argue that if you looked at American history as a whole, I mean, a lot of problems, but as a whole, most Americans were biblically oriented. They didn't understand as well as they should have, but they were still biblically oriented, and they were very religious. And all the presidents quoted the Bible all over the place until we entered somewhere after World War II. Things started to change, and our blessings are starting to slip away.
Well,
Go ahead.
Something I was thinking about is before World War II, America was just a country kind of out here on its own, and we weren't great or small, or we were just a country. Great Britain was Great Britain, and it seems that they were much more open to helping Israel and the Israeli people. And World War II, when World War II broke out, they had to pull back and take care of their own, and they left Israel out on their own. At the end of World War II, we helped Israel to establish the state of Israel. And our blessings were immense. But little by little, we've turned our back on Israel, our only ally in the Middle East. We've turned our back, and I think we're going to see our blessings diminish greatly there as well.
Yeah, in the last 8 years, we've pretty much openly rejected Israel. I mean, he made Netanyahu leave the White House out the back door. Remember that?
With the trash.
Yep. And you know he did that symbolically on purpose.
And by the way, Harry Truman had to use a lot of political muscle to push the UN to approve Israeli independence. You know, that's one of Harry Truman's greatest accomplishments, I think. Maybe it's
so you maybe could also tie blessings and curses to how a country, and especially how Ephraim and Manasseh as a country treat Israel.
I agree. You know, we have the oldest constitution, and it was based on biblical principle. And then, as one of the newest countries, if you will, our constitution to have lasted this long, why would we turn our back on it? Why would we turn our back on blessings? It makes no sense.
We were listening to a famous historian, and I never saw it this way, but he said the American colonies were primarily based on the Old Testament and some Reformed thinkers from Europe like John Locke. Old Testament, I thought he would have said New Testament. Then I you look at New England especially, look at a lot of the laws that they had, like no Christmas, Salem was a lot of things are really Old Testament oriented. And I never realized how biblical those pilgrims were, and those Puritans. You know, the Puritans were the first settlers in New England. I mean, I'm speaking relative to other countries in the world. And obviously, they weren't as biblically, they don't understand the Bible as well as the Church of God, but compared to the rest of the world, that was probably the most biblical place on the planet, was New England and much of America in the early years.
Well, they had decency laws. You know, just that in and of itself made a better country. I was in a mall, this is a few years ago, and there was a guy sitting there in the mall, a very nice mall, a very high-end mall, and he's sitting there, and he has an adult magazine with the centerfold out, and it was terrible, and nobody said anything. No security came up and said, hey, this is time and place. Nothing. There were no decency laws anymore. People have foul language written on their shirts, and their butt hanging out of their pants. There's just no decency laws anymore.
I still can't get over people in public showing their underwear. I saw it in one of my classes. This player, I think he's some athlete, he turned around to the class, and it was just by accident, been over to pick up something, and oh well, never mind. I just can't get over that. I know it's not uncommon, but I just can't get over it.
My son said, let's put a sign on the door that says, please have your pants held up with a belt for safety conditions. And I said, how do we explain that? He goes, because it ain't going to be safe for them if they come in here.
Let's go to the second slide.
All right. We're at Deuteronomy 28:4. Blessed shall be the fruit of your body, the produce of your ground, and the increase of your herds, the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks. And the Lord will grant you plenty of goods in the fruit of your body, in the increase of your livestock, and in the produce of your ground, in the land of which the Lord swore to your fathers to give you.
Before we go to the curses, one of the things that in American history you can often see was that they had big, for the most part, big healthy families for many, many years, up until, I guess, until about the 50s and 60s, till the birth rate thing changed. And the biggest problem American farmers have had for many, many, many decades, too much food. I know people are going to look, what do you mean too much food? You know, I've seen photographs from like 1890 and 1910 where some states like Iowa, Northern Illinois, all those corn belt places, Iowa, they had so much corn stacked up that in the silos where they keep it, they couldn't put it all in the silo. It was stacked up next to it. And so, the big problem was the farmers said, yeah, we got all this produce, but we're not going to get enough price. The prices won't be high enough because there's too much. Now, you talk about a problem for a country to have. There are a lot of countries in the world that have never had the problem of too much food. But that's been America's agricultural history. Now, I think the government's come in to keep price control and all that other complex ag stuff. But the problem in this country usually is, not always, until lately, until we've had all this bad weather, has been too much of corn and a bunch of other stuff.
It came to the point to where the government was paying farmers to let the land go fallow and not plant it. They would subsidize them. They would pay them so much just to let land sit there.
Because we've had so much food. And relative to most places in the world, food is cheap in this country. I know we all complain about it, but compared to the money that most people have, let's face it, we Americans eat well.
We live in a country where people spend money to lose weight.
Yeah.
They pay people to teach them to lose weight. We've been so overly blessed. And there's other countries where they're literally starving. Why would we change those blessings? Why wouldn't we be so thankful that we'd be on our knees every day just thanking God for giving us so much?
It's like right now what Venezuela's going through. You would think after countries and dictators have tried it countless times throughout the last 150 years at least, socialism, that they'd learned by now that it ends in abject failure and starvation and death. But they keep trying it and they keep failing. All right, you want to move on to the curses?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, Deuteronomy 28:18. Cursed shall be the fruit of your body and the produce of your land, the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks.
I want to be careful when I look at this because I guess the curses aren't bad yet. And I want to be, because obviously America's still blessed. But we're having an increase in autism, and the birth rate is down dramatically. And the number of young families forming is down dramatically. And we are having some weather problems, which sometimes mess up the crop yield. I don't know what's going to happen this year. As I understand it, if you get too much rain at harvest time, you're going to lose a lot of your harvest. But if the rain holds back, we'll have a bumper harvest. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how it works out this year.
Yeah, we were in a drought situation until a few weeks ago. We were all summer, the growing season when you need the water, we had none. And when harvest season was about to start, we got inundated with water.
Yeah, so it could be bad. I don't know how bad it's going to be. We'll have to wait and see. But I would say the trend is God hasn't taken all our blessings, but I do think we're moving in the wrong direction. But people don't see the connection between being ungodly and getting less blessings and bad weather.
Well, I mean, not just weather. I mean, we've seen diseases increase tremendously. Things that we had pretty much eliminated, all but eliminated off the face of the earth even, are coming back. We're seeing bubonic plague. We're seeing, what's some of the other ones? Help me out. Some of the ones that we had been...
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, yep. We're seeing an increase. Well, right now, we're in Ohio. We've had so many heroin overdoses, or it's an epidemic almost down here in southern Ohio. People are dying of heroin overdoses like crazy. And it's sad because it affects everybody. But we're seeing so many things that we had gotten rid of at one point coming back, and new things like these super bugs that the overuse of antibiotics and that is causing to, come around. But if you look at it, a lot of things we had eliminated are coming back.
Let's go to the third set of slides. This is protection and military success slide.
All right. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. And the curses, the Lord will cause you to be defeated. Your enemies shall go out one way against them, or you shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them. You shall become troublesome to all the kingdoms of the earth. A nation whom you have not known shall eat the fruit of your land and the produce of your labor, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed continually.
Now, obviously that did happen in ancient Israel. The question is, America, had all those years of never losing any war and even Great Britain. When you look at the size of Britain and you look at the size of the British Empire, the only thing you can say is God had to be blessing them. I can't see any other way to look at it. Did we just lose connection?
I hear you.
You can hear me, okay.
I'm good.
No, that was me. I had to mute my my camera for a moment.
Okay, at any rate, but now what you're finding is America's military is declining, still not crisis stage yet, and people like the Iranians are hassling our Navy in the Persian Gulf, and the Russians are buzzing our ships in the Mediterranean, and the Chinese are defying us with these islands in the Pacific. Now, maybe none of those is dramatic, but it's showing a loss of respect for America's military power.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
The Philippine president threatened to swear at our president, and I believe didn't the Chinese refuse to bring the steps to the Air Force One? The president,
yeah, they did. You're right, they did.
And they asked him to bring the steps, and they refused, and they said, it's our airport, and there are steps, and we're not bringing them.
Yeah, they made him walk out the back of the plane.
Yes.
Kind of like he did Netanyahu, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're showing disrespect for America and disrespect for... I saw this thing where it was in China. He had to walk in the back of the line. Our media didn't cover it, but I saw it online. In the back of the line for some reason. I'm not sure. I think that's what Trump was alluding to the other day, that they're losing respect for America and our leadership. I don't know if people understood it, but I understood what he was hinting at. It is starting to happen. I don't know. I guess it's not real bad yet, but you can see the trend is going that way. And I imagine if we continue in a very ungodly direction, we'll weaken our military. And I think, I look at some of the generals that seem to be in charge of our military, they do not look like fighting men to me.
They're replacing our generals with lawyers. And a lot of our people are not happy with that, because lawyers basically are civilians. They're not necessarily military trained men. And they are replacing them with politicians and lawyers and people like that. And a lot of our troops don't like it. They don't want to serve with a guy that's never had to do what they had to do, or under a man, I guess, that's never had to do what they've had to do, that doesn't understand the actual engagement. They just come up with these arbitrary rules of engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be a disaster when your military is controlled by people who, I guess, you can be a politician in the military and rise to high rank and don't really understand it, from a fighter combat perspective. You're more of a military politician. That's just my opinion. I think our military is being undermined in various ways by politicians who really don't want America to be a military power, because their worldview is America's military might is the problem with the world. I know, as crazy as that sounds, there are people on the far left, who don't believe in God, and they don't believe in American military power. And I think God is allowing us to if we continue in this ungodly direction, to be weakened militarily.
I don't know if it's true, but I think it is that the head of the Air Force has never flown a plane, and the head of our Navy has never even
on the water.
piloted a rowboat. That's what I'm told.
I had a lieutenant colonel. A lieutenant colonel tell me, he goes, I did not leave the Army. The Army left me. And he said, this last group of Rangers came out with beer guts and jowls. He said they did not put them through the Ranger School. He said that after, I don't know how many years, 20 plus years in the military, he's never seen Rangers come out of Ranger School not just being ripped, hard, strong, unbelievable, manly men. And this last time they came out with the Rangers patches. I had a Marine sniper told me that his sniper school basically was they let him shoot long guns and gave him a patch. They asked him what he wanted to do, and he said, I want to go to sniper school. And he goes, I wasn't trained.
Let's go to the fourth set of slides, please.
Deuteronomy 28:1. Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth. The Lord will establish you as a holy people to himself, just as he has sworn to you, if you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in his ways. Verse 10, then all peoples of the earth shall see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of you. Curses 28:37, and you shall become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, where the Lord will drive you.
That one's scary. Obviously, that happened to some extent to Judah, and maybe to a lesser extent to the northern 10 tribes when they got kicked out. But you do have that feeling that there was a time when certain nations were feared, during the days of King David, when Israel had its greatest space and everybody feared King David. And maybe at first when Solomon was a good king, but all that faded away. One of the big lessons of World War II is that Pearl Harbor actually worked to America's advantage, because the Japanese admiral, he was nervous and afraid of America. I mean, he didn't let his second or third wave of planes go, and didn't get the aircraft carriers, didn't get the repair depot, didn't get the fuel depot, all of which turned out to be very crucial. The big battleships really in modern warfare of the 1940s weren't that valuable. So actually, I think God sort of protected America. I don't know if we probably didn't appreciate it till years later when they analyzed everything, but I don't see America getting those kind of blessings anymore. And you don't get the feeling the Iranians are afraid of us or anybody.
Nobody's afraid of us. When you got these little tin pot third world dictators like Gary said, calling our president names. I mean, what's left?
That's
You're going there. I mean, what's left? What can the world do now?
that's right.
They were talking about Trump. Trump said, if I pulled in and they didn't give me the red carpet treatment, I would simply taxi out and leave. And of course, no one. I think I know the way Trump thinks. He would then punish them some way economically or something. And people are talking about how unpresidential of him. It was more presidential to walk out the tail end underneath the latrine and be ignored by some of these commentators' views. Our president is the king of the world, if they can't treat him with that respect. I think I agreed with, I'm not saying I'm a Trump fan by any means, but I think I agreed with his attitude on that. I would just roll it up and left, and then they could have faced me in the economic market,
I would have asked the pilot, how much fuel do we have and where can we go? Because we're getting out of here. We are
also,
leaving.
they made the statement, well, Trump talks rough. That'll cause a war. Actually, I don't know if anybody remembers this, probably but me, but when Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire, the press went, oh, this is terrible. He's a cowboy. He's going to get us in a war. You can't say that about the Soviet Union. Now, it was an evil empire. Nobody can doubt that. 100 million people killed. They can verify that factually. And I think when Ronald Reagan outraced them in the I call it the Star Wars technology and arms race, and was tough with them, that actually we didn't get in a war and we actually won. Sometimes you have to talk tough to your enemies, and then other times you have to be diplomatic. But I remember when he went to see Gorbachev, and they said, "Oh, you're gonna go for this nuclear disarmament and no Star Wars." He said, "No. I know what I want and what I don't want." And the press was all mad. "But you got to give the Russians. You got to compromise with them." He said, "No." And it was, as it turned out, he was right. I just think our press has a limited view of history. Anyway, that's just my perspective.
Donald Trump, it was either last night or the night before, stated that if he's elected, there are a lot of generals and admirals that he is going to fire on the spot.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, and the media said, well, you can't fire generals and admirals. By the way, if Lincoln didn't have the ability to fire generals, the Civil War would not have been won.
Yeah, yeah.
He fired a whole list of generals because Lee made them look like idiots.
When they tell Trump that he can't do that, he smiles and says, "Watch me. If I'm the president, I'm gonna do it."
They criticize, like you were talking about, they criticized Reagan. And they're talking about how Trump is a loose cannon. I want my enemies to think that the leader of this country is a bit of a loose cannon and you don't know what he's going to do next. That'll put them on their heels. Remember the joke he made? He got up to the mic one time. I don't know what the event was, but he said something to the effect, the bombs will start falling in 20 minutes or whatever he said. And everybody kind of panicked. Rush in the back of their head. They knew he was joking probably, but they're thinking, really? Maybe we shouldn't mess with this guy. He jokes about, bombing us, so maybe we should just leave him alone. And I'm telling you, if your enemy don't know what you're going to do next and they think you're a little off, guess what? They're going to think twice before they jump on you.
I still remember when I went through boot camp at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we were out on the firing course, and they told us we had to run forward as we were firing at different targets, and they said, as you're running, scream as much as you can and smile as you're running. It says, you make that man crazier than he is, you're going to scare him to death.
I tell my kids sometimes, on occasion, crazy beats karate. And,
yeah.
I say it so much that they actually repeat it to me now.
Not that we're recommending being crazy, but I think this is the way it worked out. Do you remember Ronald Reagan implied or stated that after he got elected, that if those hostages weren't released, Iran was going to really catch it. The very day he was sworn into office, they released the hostages.
Yeah, we didn't send them how many $1 billion? I forget. We didn't send them billions of dollars.
190 billion. to John Kerry's son-in-law.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's go to next number 5.
All right. 28:3. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. The Lord will command the blessings on you in your storehouses and in all to which you set your hand, and he will bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. The curses, the Lord will strike you with the boils of Egypt, with tumors, with the scab, with the itch from which you cannot be healed. The Lord will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of heart. And if you despise my statutes, or if your soul abhors my judgments, so that you do not perform all my commandments, but break my covenant, I also will do this to you. I will even appoint terror over you, wasting disease and fever, which shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for the enemy shall eat it.
And I list that category under the category of physical health and physical good standing and mental health. And the opposite would be physically you're not doing well and mentally you're not doing well. I mean, look at things like, as you look on the screen, sorrow of heart and terror. I guess we're not doing all that bad in America, but I do think we're getting a little less healthy, and there's a lot more mental illness and mental quirks going around. There are a lot of people with all kinds of depression. I mean, have we ever seen this much depression before?
Look at the pharmaceuticals. How many drugs are there for this depression, that depression, that depression? That I'm going to jump off a bridge. I can't stop crying. They got a pill for everything because we have turned from God and we're weak. And I tell people, imagine when the tribulation comes, or even really, really hard times come, and the people who have functioned every day barely because of the pill they take can't get that pill.
God is your defense, and the farther away you get from him, the less defense you have against things like that.
It's true. Let's go to number 7. This is financial blessings and global leadership.
All right. Deuteronomy 28:12. The Lord will open to you his good treasure, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. Curses. And your heavens which are over your head shall be bronze, and the earth under you shall be iron. The Lord will change the rain of your land to powder and dust. From the heaven it shall come down on you until you are destroyed.
And we have had, now where we are, we've had some other kind of weather problems, but there are parts of America like California and southern places where the droughts have been almost record-breaking. And I would say God is not, at least some of our weather blessings are being taken away. And it's hurting us financially. And let's go to the next one more section that relates to weather and finance. This is our last section.
All right. 28:11. And the Lord will grant you plenty of goods in the fruit of your body, in the increase of your livestock, and in the produce of your ground, in the land of which the Lord swore to your fathers to give you. The Lord will open to you his good treasure, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only and not beneath, if you heed the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, and are careful to observe them.
Before we get to the curses, I want to mention that if you include Great Britain, much of the 17th and 18th and 19th century, London and Britain was the financial center of the world. And then it shifted in the 20th century, and maybe latter parts of the 19th century, to America and Wall Street. But I'm not saying that they're still not powerful players, but financially, the wealth was here, and everybody acknowledged it. And we had great trade surpluses, and that's where the wealth was. But now, it's a whole different story. Would you go ahead and read the curses?
Deuteronomy 28:33, a nation whom you have not known shall eat the fruit of your lands and the produce of your labor, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed continually. The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail.
And I have a list here of our trade deficits with, for the last few years, and we've been negatively. Now it includes nations like Mexico as well as China, Japan, and others. And these numbers would be like 44 billion 2 quarters ago. The last quarter, it's 39 billion. They say, hey, it's a good one. We're not as bad off as we were the previous quarter. And then it goes up and down. But it's always very, very negative. We're going deeper and deeper in debt to China and to some extent Mexico and other countries. And I just see, and I can see in a lot of places, the heavy manufacturing firms owned by Japanese companies and other foreign companies are owning a lot of things in America. And we're becoming a debtor nation. And that national debt, which has doubled in the last 7.5 years, nobody seems to be concerned about it.
In 2012, our national debt was equal to just over $50,000 for every citizen in the country.
Yep, that's every man, woman, and child.
We're becoming the tail.
And before we end, I just want to add one thing. Obviously, America could come back up and do better militarily, debt-wise, job-wise, and maybe even morality could increase. But I think, which would be a good thing, and if it does, we may have more time than we think before this country goes down. But I don't see us ever being able to completely turn it back around to where, as far as just people being religious and interested in the Bible, I think they've pretty much bamboozled the younger generation to be anti-church and anti-Bible.
Yeah, that's true, but you know, I've seen a report today that they're saying the millennials are starting to become more, there seems to be more conservatism in the millennials. Probably because they've seen the failure of what's been happened before them.
You know, it always seemed to me like it took place probably in the 60s, maybe the hippie generation, that they began to throw all the rules away. And I remember the motto, they said, if it feels good, it's okay to do, and things like that. And that's when all the drugs began to come into the country, and everybody was on a high there for a while. Yeah,
now those people are running the country.
Yeah, it's like the joke, the guy on the corner that had a sign that said, God is dead. And this guy came up to him and said, hey, guy, I'm going to give you my condolences for your God.
Yeah.
Mine's doing great.
You know? It's good to remember God's still in control. I think he wants this country to learn certain lessons. And I guess we're going to learn them, that without God, things are not going to go so well. People like to believe in mankind, you know, and science, but mankind and science without God's morality is not going to work.
And that's why, there's the answer. Nobody, they'll believe that we were seeded by aliens and that we came from monkeys and everything else before they'll accept that God made us. And by accepting that God made us means you have to accept morality. And so if I came from a monkey or alien or whatever, then I don't have to have this moral code. And there's your issue. They've taught our children that we invented God as a figment of our imagination, not that he invented us as a great plan.
Oh, just for the sake of knowing it, the latest economic data, construction for business construction is down more than expected. Employment is down more than expected, and a few other stats, all of which means the economy, which wasn't going gangbusters as it was like 1.3 or 4, is now going to slow down even more. So none of that is good news, and none of that would indicate that God is blessing America. Well, we are getting some blessings. I don't want to say we're not getting some, but we're not. But it could be a lot better, and I think there are a lot of good religious people in America. I mean, even if they don't understand the Bible as well as they should, are trying to do the right thing. But I do think the leadership of this country, in academia, media, legal profession, education, whatever I'm missing, news media, they're definitely leading us the wrong direction.
By design.
They're all responsible, but you got to be willing to follow them too, and that's the sad thing that so many people in this country are willing to follow those people down that path.
And it'd be nice if more young people got a little more interested in, but we'll see. It's hard to predict the future. One of the things we have to be careful of is crying wolf, wolf. I mean, the trends are down, but how fast they're going to go down, no one can be sure, because the experts don't agree, and it may be even a spiritual decision.
I think we're going to find out in a couple of months where we're at and whether or not we are going to get a reprieve or go further down the pipe faster.
Yeah, I think so too, and we will.
That might be a blessing.
Well, we'll see. If God's going to bring Christ sooner, but if he's not going to bring Christ sooner, we'll just go down and still have to wait those last X number of years in poverty and mess. Like for instance, there are politicians. God has given us all these natural resources, like coal and especially natural gas. America has more natural gas than anybody, and a lot of it is released through fracking. Well, if there are politicians who say they want to stop that, if they stop it, and it may take a year or two to see the effect, but oil prices will go up, natural gas will go up, and electricity rates will really jump, which will be a drag on the economy. Less money for people to spend. Businesses will have to charge higher prices because they got to use electricity too. If God's given us these natural resources, we should use them. I mean, use them cleanly and wisely, but use them. And I was just thinking about God's warnings are inexorable. One thing is for sure, the northern 10 tribes, they went ungodly quick, and they went into captivity quickly. Well, a century and a half, about 2 centuries. And 4.5 or so centuries later, Judah lasted longer because they stuck with God and his holy days and things longer. But Judah eventually went bad, and they went into captivity. So if God threatens something, he means it.
Yep, absolutely. And just to add to what you said about the fracking, the only way to end a country like us, to bring us down to the level of the third world countries, is to stand on our energy hose. If we have cheap and plentiful energy, we will run the world. We can accomplish anything, and we'll have growth. That's why all these green groups and all this junk you see, all of it is focused on ending our our energy. We do so well at like you said, natural gas, oil. We are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas and coal. Nobody has more than we do, and with that much energy readily available and cheap, you can accomplish anything. That's what drives everything is energy. And by stepping on that hose and preventing us to use our own resources helps bring the country down economically and slows our growth, stops the engine. It stops the engine when you take it and you step on the gas line.
You know, there's a question that kind of intrigues me. They say that we have enough natural gas to last for 100 years using all we can use of it. Now, why do they fool around trying to build an electric car when they could simply convert the internal combustion engine over to natural gas at minimal cost?
You notice every time? See, there was a while they wanted let's go with natural gas or propane power. Remember, there was a time where they wanted us to go that route. Every time we go in a direction as a country, and that at one point looked like it was a good idea to the environmentalists, once it becomes once it works, then they all of a sudden want to shut it down. It's not about clean energy. It's about ending our ability to produce. Anytime and any way we do anything, if we were able to produce solar energy that was economical and it competed with gasoline, with the energy you got out of it versus the expense of it, it's nowhere near that now, and it probably never will be. But if we got that far, they would find a way to shut down solar. They find a way to shut down water. They don't like dams. Oh, dams were great because they were clean, renewable energy. Well, once that happened, they started saying, well, you're messing with the fish, you're messing with that. Every single time you got to make you wonder, when we get a new energy source or we find another energy source that we can make work well and it is economical, they go after that all of a sudden. And it's because the only purpose, it's not about environmentalism, it's not about saving the planet, it's about stepping on our energy hose and shutting down capitalism. That is their entire goal. That is it. Everything else is a lie.
And control. They had on the ballot, whenever we voted last, they wanted to tax sunshine. They wanted to tax solar energy. So they're going to tax you for having a sun over your head.
Actually, they taxed them for rain, and I'm not making this up.
Oh, they do that. Yeah. I've had to go out and measure.
I have a hard time believing it, but it's true.
No, they do. I've had to go out and measure whatever roof lines we have, whatever we have above the ground that covers where water hits and goes, and drains off into wherever. We get taxed on that square footage.
There's some communities where you have to have a permit to have a rain barrel.
Yeah. And they want to tax electric cars. Electric cars are great. They're environmental. We're going to subsidize them. Well, they subsidize them because they're not economically viable without subsidizing them. So we're going to subsidize them, but whoa, now people are using them. Well, we got to tax you by the mile you drive because we got to shut that down too. It's ridiculous. Every time
the natural gas
around and to do what they want, they find a way to shut it down. Diesel is very efficient. Diesel would be a great way to have diesel cars. Are very efficient, very powerful, and very economical. But they have found ways to regulate them to the point where they're not a realistic alternative.
South Florida, there's a town that tells you what color to paint the inside of your house. It's Coral Gables, one of those towns there. And I read the other day.
Why would anybody live there?
I read the other day that there's a fella somewhere down in South Florida, and he has a little bit of land, and his mother has been living in a treehouse for 25 years, and somebody called and reported that it wasn't safe after 25 years, and she's had to move out of the treehouse. Now, I mean, she might be crazy for living in a treehouse or whatever, but shouldn't she have the right to live in a treehouse? What's it hurt?
At one time, it was okay to be crazy and do what you want in America. Now they want to tell you everything you can do. I don't know. Garden, you can't have a garden. You can't have this. You can't have that. Anything you do, especially if it's different or if you can it helps you to be like the garden, more self-sufficient. They want to shut it down. They just want control.
No.
And you were right. Whoever said that earlier about control, that's exactly what it's about, control.
Now up here in Dearborn, the Ford Motor Company is they're working on a driverless car, and I often wonder what Henry Ford would say about that if he happened along one day. Well,
I'm going to say we have that in Florida.
what's the practical use of a driverless car? To start with, I don't want to get in one.
Well,
I think
if you
drive
drove as
around
much
down
as
here-
I did, you might appreciate it. I wouldn't mind it once in a while.
By the way, there was a guy on the radio, and I believe he said that he heard a lot of environmentalists about 15 years ago. They were celebrating that we were running out of oil and natural gas. Now, it turns out they were wrong. They found a lot more. But they were happy we were running out of it.
Oh, yeah. They are. They were.
They're
They want.
happy about that.
Yep. Remember that? There was it peak oil. Well, guess what? Oil has not peaked. I mean, we still have as much oil and can continue to find more oil because of the methods they use. In fact, some places where they thought they had pumped it dry, they go back and it's filled again. I mean, more oil has come up. So the whole notion of peak oil was just to get the world to, to slow down the growth of this country, basically this country.
I don't think
want.
the oil reserves are there by coincidence. I think that was all part of God's plan for this particular time in history.
Oh, and by the way, I know we're over time, but I want to mention what we're going to do next week. Next week, we're going to look at Matthew 16:18. Did Christ build the church around or on the Apostle Peter? Did Christ build the church around or on the Apostle Peter? Matthew 16:18. And I hope you'll find it interesting for those who can come and watch us next weekend.
All right. Sounds good. Does anyone have anything else to add? Well, if not, we're going to say good night, everyone. We hope everyone enjoys their Sabbath. It started here a while ago. I'm sure it's headed west as the sun always heads that way. So we hope everyone enjoys it, and I appreciate hearing from all our viewers that I do sometimes throughout the week, and we hope that everyone can make it back again next week. And until then, we will sign off and say good night, everyone.
Good night, Ken.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here. And hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.